Perfect. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to have Dr. Susan E. Schwartz joining us today. And as I was looking back at my notes from your work, I realized it was about 2 years ago, actually, that I led a book club on your prior work on the absent father effect on daughters.
True. Yes.
So I was so thrilled to hear about your new book on father-son dynamics, as I feel that can be a realm of the psyche and a psychological issue that's oftentimes neglected in today's platforms. So I'm going to introduce you, then I will ask you some questions, and towards the end, we will have a live Q&A. So this is going to be a very natural, organic, casual conversation, but I was so thankful that you agreed to have this conversation because I feel this is so important. And in my own clinical work with men and with young men especially, I definitely see the father wound show up in males, right? Very differently than among young women and women. So I'm really thrilled to dive into your latest book that was just published, well, less than 2 weeks ago, right?
That's exactly right. And of course, it is my pleasure to be talking with you. And I also wanted to make sure that if people order the book through Routledge or any of my other books, there is a discount code. It is the following: 26AEV1. I'll repeat it at the end.
Okay, perfect. And then in the meanwhile, maybe someone can put it in the group chat. That would be so helpful.
Good.
Okay. All right. So let me introduce you, and then we will dive into the questions. So many questions. I really try to narrow it down around subtopics of the father-son dynamic, the father wound, that would feel universal enough and relatable enough for the readers. So let me introduce you. Now, granted, this is my first interview. I love asking questions. And when I saw your book, you sent me an email. So thank you, first of all, thinking of me. Now I'm like, I love asking questions. And oftentimes, clients and friends alike and acquaintances tell me, ask pretty good and deep questions. So I'm like, let me see if we can have a conversation. So that's how this is my first, live conversation. So let me introduce you without further ado. So Dr. Susan E. Schwartz is a Jungian analyst trained in Zurich, Switzerland, whose work has made important contributions to our understanding of identity development, relational experience, and the ways early attachments continue to shape the psyche through life. Through her writing and clinical work, Dr. Schwartz has explored the often unseen psychological impact of parental and relational dynamics, with particular attention to fathers and the enduring effects of paternal presence, absence, longing, idealization, and loss. Her work also extends beyond father-daughter and father-son relationships into broader questions of identity, embodiment, narcissism, intimacy, psychological fragmentation, and the development of self. An internationally recognized lecturer and author, Dr. Schwartz has written numerous journal articles and book chapters and books in Jungian analytical psychology. She's the author of several books, including The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father Desire, Father Wounds, The Imposter Syndrome and the As-If Personality, The Fragility of Self, a Jungian exploration of the Puer archetype, girl unfolding, an analytical exploration of love and narcissism, and most recently, Absent Fathers, Yearning Sons, a Jungian analysis of the father-son dynamic. So today we're going to be exploring your work on father-son dynamics and the ways in which paternal relationships influence the development of one's identity, embodiment, belonging, desire, and their experience of self. We're also going to be examining broader themes that run throughout your work, including absence, idealization, envy, and also cultural and intergenerational trauma aspects, and also archetypal patterns such as the Puer, and considering how early relational worlds continue to live within us long after childhood has ended. So to begin with, I'm really curious as to what has led you to lean into the topic of father-son dynamics in contrast with your prior work around the female experience and the female and the daughter psyche.
Well, a lot of people asked me after I wrote the first book on fathers and daughters, what is the relationship with fathers and sons? What is the similarity and what is the difference? And I thought about it for a while and decided that um, the fathers in general and their place in our world as fathers, not just as providers, but as emotional nurturers and guides and um, leading one into being able to love and feel, and their body was also really important for males. And of course, the men that I see, fathers and sons, replicated this as well. So that's what brought me to write about it, as well as, again, I think it is quite profound and says a lot that fathers have rarely been explored in the analytical literature, psychological literature, period. Hardly looked at.
Yes, excellent point. And of course, I wonder whether that has to do with the necessary arrival and rising of the feminist movement, right? And we'll dive into like the differences that you touch on between how Dr. Carl Jung experienced his father versus how Sigmund Freud, right? Like their different relationship to the paternal figure and the masculine, which was very, very interesting. So what are, would you say, like the main key differences? And I also really appreciate towards the end of your book how you bring up the fact that it is important for fathers to also own, embody, and connect with their what is classically seen as feminine, the emotional function, right? Which is often disembodied. And even within the Jungian, right, Jungian world, like, right, this is the symbolic responsibility of the maternal figure. And I'm actually getting chills even as I'm asking you this question.
Yes, you're right. So let me just go back a couple of things to what you've said. One is that both Freud and Jung, very influential figures in the inner world explorations of the 20th century, both of them around the same age, lost their, you could say, belief in their fathers. They were disappointed. What Freud did with it was the Oedipal story and how the son will kill the father. That's where he took it. Where Jung took it was on his own spiritual or internal quest. But I want to emphasize they were both disappointed. Do we know? Did they really talk to their fathers? But you see, we live in a different era. And I think in those eras, fathers were even more distant than they have been now. So I think that place of a father you can talk to about so many things, one of which might be your body, how you change, what your confusion is, what you feel like, how you deal with emotion, was it wasn't even on the radar screen. Now we have more of that. Not really enough, though, at all.
Yes. There's still work that needs to be done, right? But should have, before, fathers were much more relegated to the external arena
Yes.
of life where we work and they were providing, much less so within the internal world and also internal arena of the home.
Exactly. However, you also mentioned feminists and the change in women's roles. But I think what happened, if we read case studies, books, whatever, that women were pretty much in the role of mother and pretty much blamed. So the problem with the child, I don't mean to be stereotypical about this. So the problem with a child then is the problem with the mother and child. It is not the problem with the absence of the father. And the absence of the father in so many ways could be one of the issues. The increase in women's positions out in the world, I don't think it's quite enough at all. But I also think that it has been way too easy to put the idea or the responsibility for children onto women because they're the ones who are related. Actually, people are related. So it doesn't matter. It's who you are as a person and are you able to get into your relatedness.
Wonderful. Yes, very true. All right. Now I'd like to kind of dive into like the father shadow as you
Yes.
lean into in chapter 2. So you discuss right the father shadow and self-persecution, and when the son internalizes an absent or even a psychologically toxic father, that internalized figure oftentimes becomes a really harsh inner critic within the psyche of the son. Now, how do you perceive, how do you see analytical therapy? How have you guided and helped a man or son separate his own genuine self-evaluation from the inherited persecutory father shadow, maybe even carrying the shadow that his father, due to cultural, psychological understanding, perhaps even external and internal resources, just did not have access to, right? Because in prior generations, they just did not have the same access and acceptance around psychological work. Like I know in France, there's still that stigma. If you go see a shrink, oftentimes they still use the term. That has to mean there has to be something wrong with you. Otherwise, you won't need that type of support, right?
Right. And equally, the idea is that if you're looking inside, that isn't always lauded by by everyone. I think Jung speaks about this a lot in the collected works, where he talks about the unlived life of the parent passing on to the next generation. And I think more recently, we have come up with and thought about and looked at transgenerational issues. So if we look back, where was the grandfather? Where was the father? What did they do? And what traumas did they experience that they learned to hold inside and not express? Because so many fathers go silent about their internal confusions in their inner world. There is also a thing too, still, the father is not supposed to cry or really love on his son, you could say, or really, be so overtly emotional. It's very, very obvious in so many cultures, each culture in a different way. There are maybe a few where there is really the expression of full emotion from father to son. Not so many. Not so many. Yeah. So the shadow of the father would be the unlived life, his unlived life, for instance, unlived profession, unlived love, unlived desires, unlived physical well-being. In all areas of life, whatever he hasn't done might very much go onto the son. Now, the son is smaller. He begins
mm,
little. So inevitably he is not going to be able to do or be everything that the father was not.
mm,
And so that sets up what is the matter with me. So if the father comes home, father's at home, and the son feels from the father something is wrong. If the father doesn't say,
mm,
the son will think, what did I do wrong? Not that the son did anything wrong, but a child always does this. Shame, guilt, self-deprecation, uh, internal blank, the walking dead, half alive, very
mm,
difficult words that convey not in touch with one's soul,
mm,
because the father isn't. There's the shadow. Father not in touch with his soul. And that's what I was referring to, both with Jung and Freud. You could say neither of their fathers were in touch with their soul or their spirit or their inner self. And I
mm,
think what one of the wonderful things of our era is that we are exploring more. The hope is that we continue to do so.
mm, mm. I think that throughout your books, Dr. Schwartz, one thing I really so profoundly appreciate is how you bring the Jungian lens into a more embodied and tangible. You really bring what can be very abstract in analytical psychology to a very tangible, embodied understanding, right? So I just wanted to share that and highlight, yes, your gift in making really abstract Jungian principles into more concrete and lived in and lived through principles.
Th-
Um,
Thank you. But in any of us as therapists or analysts, uh, we are in the business, you could say, of uniting mind, body, and soul, and paying attention to what has been absent, what we have lost. Not just that, but we also want to find joy. So joy, inspiration. So many stories that I have heard of sons. The father wants them to be a jock or sports, and they're not that way. Or the father wants them to be a musician, and they play soccer. So the goals of each and the spirit again of each might be very different. It might also be very similar. Either way can create some kind of a stress because neither are going to be an exact replica of the other, and they shouldn't be. The reason I use absence actually in all my books, but in the titles specifically of this one and the one on the daughters, is the goal is to fill it. So the goal is to fill what is not there. It's like we have a cup and the cup is empty. We want to fill it with the kind of fluid that we like and that fits our own appetite.
Yes. Yep. Way back in 2018, I started a question kept arising in my own meditative practices and inner work, and it was how to rebuild one's internal father when we didn't have any knowledge or personal experience of one's personal father. And Dr. Schwartz, at the time, it was just a theoretical question. But there was a part of my psyche that knew it was possible. But at the time, I just did not have the theoretical, the academic, the experiential understanding and knowledge and studies to answer that question. And that has been one passion of mine is how do we rebuild missing internal structural beams that were not internalized as a result of an absent parental figure, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So, in Jungian psychology, the idea of the archetype, which would be some kind of an aspect inside of ourselves that, in a way, we all have. So, whether we have had a father
mm,
or not, there is,
mm,
well, actually, biologically,
mm,
we began with the egg and the sperm. So there is, in a
mm,
physical way, an idea of a father. And then we also get these ideas from dreams,
mm,
from YouTube, from
mm,
movies, from books, from the people down the street, from the other people that are friends. And we experience a father even
mm,
when we don't have one.
mm,
And we create inside of ourselves the good fathering towards ourselves. So it's that inside place that gets filled is it
mm,
maybe a very different father than the absence, and it is tailored to us. And over time, I think
mm,
we come to realize how we are fathering ourselves in a helpful way. There is another thing to add, which is the father complex.
mm,
So Jung, who's, as I said, his story with his father was pretty distant, wrote one essay on the father called the the destiny of the father in the individual, just one, and mentioned very little about
mm,
sons and fathers. So I mean,
mm,
you know,
mm,
yeah. So it's there in the story. It isn't there, is the
mm,
point.
mm,
Yeah. And so what he did was, you could say, an intellectual exploration
mm,
and an emotional exploration. And in that way, we build the father inside.
mm, yeah.
And when you've got a negative father complex, over time, I think with help in analysis or therapy, you come to recognize, oops, this is the negative. I'm treating myself the way I don't want to be treated, or I'm treating myself the way my father did and I didn't
Mm,
like it.
mm, mm,
So there's the negative. You can also have a positive one
mm.
where, he was good, but we're not talking about that one.
Yes, yeah. And I'm so glad you bring the archetype and how using really the psychic energy that really is the archetype to reparent ourselves, refather ourselves. Oftentimes, what I do and what I will have some clients do is a diagram of every paternal figure that someone had in their life. We'll do one diagram for the relatively positive figures that represented the father archetype that yielded that archetypal energy, and then another diagram for the less nurturing, for the more negative father archetypal figures, to really bring it into consciousness and then look at the traits and attributes that the unconsciously internalized and learned unknowingly so by some. For me, for example, it was my great grandfather. It was like a male teacher I had in third grade. That was the only positive masculine figure in my life at the time, right? So like what I'm hearing is really bringing those figures maybe out of the unconscious and what the mind did not realize, but like all those archetypal resources in a way.
Yes, well, as you mentioned, transgenerational,
Mm,
there was one of the influences for sure. And also, people keep journals
mm,
or they do an active imagination,
mm,
which means they, write to themselves, or you
mm,
write what you wish, or you imagine what would it be like?
mm,
How would it be if I treated myself like a good father?
mm,
And it really works. To imagine instills or ignites something inside that is always there, which is the ability to create and to build. The other thing about filling the absence is many people do it through their creativity.
mm,
So they find a way to create this nurturance of themselves from the inside. and put it out in the world as well. So the creative comes from the absence. I'm not going to make it easy.
Mm,
Yeah, because part of what you're saying is you had to really work at finding where are these good figures?
mm,
Who really has benefited me? So
mm,
it's a process,
mm,
but one that's definitely worth it for sure.
mm. Indeed. Yes. All right. Let me see here. Let me go through every chapter. Oh, you also mentioned the de-idealization of the father figure, which I know that in my personal and clinical work around healing the mother wound, and again in general, in on the path of individuation and becoming and really reclaiming, right, the kernel of our authentic self under the layers of cultural, familial, parental, societal conditioning, right? The important and crucial step of removing, taking back the projection of the archetypal parent onto the personal parent, which includes the step of de-idealization, right? So now you write that the father needs to be close enough to receive and hold the necessary process of idealizing projections until the son can gradually take those projections back and incarnate, right? Like what he had projected onto the father. Did you talk a little bit more about that developmental process? And also, like, what allows one to be able to reclaim those qualities as their own, especially when one didn't have a good enough father who mirrored, oh, you're really good at this, or you have that trait. The Arab who did not mirror sufficiently and effectively enough those traits within their son.
Right. I think that might be why a lot of people go into analysis and therapy. So you can learn to be a good father to yourself and what that process takes, and to healthily idealize yourself healthily through the analytic and therapeutic process. Now, that doesn't have to be with a male.
Mm,
That can happen with anyone, really, in the process of bringing back the energy that is put into outer figures.
mm,
So it can be the father, it can also be people who idealize the nation or
mm,
idealize the leaders or idealize anyone, really, at the cost of their own self-worth. And
mm,
there's the issue. So people want to learn to value who they are and what they bring into the world. And if you're idealizing others, other males, other father figures, how are you going to do it yourself?
mm,
I mean, you have to do it for yourself, but not idealize self in the way that of a superiority, but of a realistic qualities. I have this, I am going to do that.
mm, mm,
A sense of achievement that is not given over to others, but is claimed oneself. In other words, even if you had a very difficult father, let me also add one of the things that I have felt and seen as different with daughters is that fathers will beat their sons. I hate to say this, but fathers will beat their sons more than they beat their
mm,
daughters. But of course, fathers have incest more with their daughters than they do with their sons. So it's not so great on either side. But what often happens with the son in the de-idealization is there's a moment, teenage, later teenage, and they have a fight. And the son will recount in therapy or analysis that fight. And in that fight,
mm,
they knew they were stronger physically and they had claimed some of the idealization back. Of course, they've got more to go, but there's something very much noted in that experience. It's not something that girls go through in a physical kind of fight with the father. More so, the sons have a
Mm.
physical fight. Yeah.
It's like the first layer of idealization
Yeah.
just shatters.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And then it has to be followed up with an internal understanding, and along with it, the what has been hurt inside of the son, and what does the son need to rebuild? Because it's an emotional and oftentimes a physical hurt, in the sense that a son can learn to be distant from his body. So sons might take on, okay, they're bodybuilding, they do sports, etc. Doesn't mean they're connected to their bodies. And it doesn't mean they know how to be intimate. And the learning of intimacy should come also with father. This is one of the things that hasn't really happened
Mm,
enough.
mm, mm, mm. So what would you say would be important to look out for and be conscious of, especially around adolescent stage and young adulthood of men to reclaim and reconnect and maintain that relationship to their body?
I think part of the relationship to the body is also a psychological relationship to the body. It has to do with a an aspect of oneself that is accepting,
Mm,
accepting and acknowledging, I have this, and I'm going to learn how to take care of me. The
mm,
father, I believe, not, this is not a stereotype, but generally does not teach his son to take care, how to eat, how to exercise, how to sleep, how to love. Usually not.
mm,
And
mm,
so those are all things that people can learn in therapy and analysis. You
mm,
learn how to take care of yourself and not negate or necessarily easily forgive, because that doesn't mean that anything has changed. It
mm,
just means, doesn't mean much.
mm,
You want to see what is really changing inside of someone.
mm, mm.
It's a journey, it's a long one. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. I actually wanted to touch on something on let me see here. Look at my notes. Of course, now I cannot find it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So you do mention like healthy idealization and excessive idealization. Like briefly, like how does one recognize like a healthy amount of idealization as a necessary process, and when it's become too much and maladaptive in a way?
You know, you're going to see it through the dreams.
Okay.
There would be images maybe of vampires or zombies. One would appear not so healthy in the dreams. The struggle, well, it comes out in a lot of ways. Struggle to be oneself. There is with many, giving up. Can't do it. I give up. So
Hmm.
you can see this place that doesn't become, I am good enough. In fact, I'm better than father. See, there's
Hmm.
another piece. We're
Hmm.
supposed to go beyond the
Hmm.
generation before. Some sons stop and can't. And that's the unconscious of the father,
Hmm.
doesn't want anyone to go beyond him.
Hmm.
So again, this becomes
Hmm.
a kind of a deception inside of oneself to save the father from themselves. There's a sacrifice,
Hmm.
a sacrifice. It's
Hmm.
the wrong sacrifice.
Hmm.
Yeah. And to become really all that one is where is the support? If it isn't from the father, you need to find it somewhere,
Mm, mm,
somewhere.
yeah. Somewhere that went, like that went into the unconscious. Like, what
Yes,
for?
well, yeah, sorry. You could say that some males do it through you mentioned a teacher,
Mm, mm,
the leader of the sports team, the one down the street,
mm,
an uncle who will be able to encourage the development of the son,
mm,
not to replicate the father, but to be themselves, to be
mm,
themselves. I give an example of someone that I had worked with, and the son and the father had a very, very difficult relationship almost their entire lives, almost their entire lives. And oftentimes in these situations, not always, but there was divorce, and the son did not want to go with the father at
mm,
all. And it took years, I mean, years, maybe 30 years. And the father contacted me and said, I want to have therapy with my son with you.
mm,
Yeah. And so we did kind of a son, father, me sessions. And over the time, each of them could be honest with each other. They went over their misunderstandings.
mm,
They talked about where they had disappointed each other. They had both grown and changed in all these years. What was interesting in the area of idealization, the son developed the same illness as the father. So they both had physical issues that were the same. So there's a very
mm,
strange idealization or a way of connecting that was very unconscious, really, for both of them.
mm,
And finally, they were able to help each other. I mean, it took a
mm,
while, but they were finally able to hear each other and listen to each other and grow. I won't say it was super or great, nor did everything get taken care of, but sufficiently and enough. So the idealization onto the father can also be a way of trying to connect, but it
mm,
doesn't do it. I
mm,
mean, because it has to be more conscious,
mm,
more known.
mm. And I'm also hearing and wondering if contacting vulnerability,
Yeah.
especially as guided by like yourself, by an analyst, by a therapist, right? It sounds like vulnerable to, right, like walk and enter vulnerability, which was healing, I'm sure, for both the father and the son as well,
Yes,
interchangeably.
exactly. The word vulnerability is incredibly important because fathers oftentimes are they grow up learning I shouldn't show my vulnerability or my wounds. And after a while, they don't feel them. They push them into the unconscious and it doesn't come out. And even if they have nightmares, they're sufficiently able to not remember their dreams. Or they become addicted to something. And
Mm,
then the son learns ignore your feelings and ignore your vulnerability. But how do you love if you're not vulnerable?
mm,
How do you get love unless you say, I need? How do you know that you need when you haven't been able to? It becomes a circle, but the
mm,
vulnerability breaks into it and allows for the humanness between the father and son. It's a
mm,
very tender place, but a place that, think about it, culturally, not too many fathers
mm,
not too many of them learn to be vulnerable. It's incredibly important.
yes. Mm. And I know early on in our conversation, you mentioned the wound of the soul, right? How fathers and men
Yeah.
cross culturally and cross historically have drifted away from their soul, right? And I'm wondering if vulnerability might be a crucial bridge back to that, and the stigma of shame, right? And the defense against vulnerability around the masculine, right, may have created walls of cement between men and their soul.
Yes, you put it very well. Walls of cement. Absolutely. Along with vulnerability, shall we add betrayal?
Hmm.
Betrayal and envy, because
Yes.
they're very difficult aspects to really, if a father can really say, you know, I envy you. You're able. I'm
Mm.
not. You're a great soccer player. I'm not. You do the violin. Superb. I
Mm.
can't do it.
Mm.
And the ability to be able to be that honest is being vulnerable and being open. If not, the father's betraying the son and himself. So these are issues which are very, they're they're old issues. It has to do with trust. It has to do with knowing that you can really trust that parent and that father deeply to honor you. And when he can't, it's a huge betrayal of one's soul and one's being. You know, in the book, I used the example of Franz Kafka, and he had a father as the Czech writer in the mid 20th century. And his father always put him down,
Mm.
always denigrated career, denigrated his body, denigrated the way he talked, interests, etc., etc. And it was betrayal all over the place. And
Mm.
Kafka, although a magnificent writer, always felt some of the words you said. As a son, he felt shame. He always felt badly about himself. He couldn't commit to love, committing to love. You learn to commit to love with a good father. Mhm.
Yes. But the good father also mirrored back to you that you were lovable and worthy of love, and that your essence, your core essence, was endlessly lovable.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. Beautiful. All right. I want to be mindful of time. Would it be okay if I ask one more question? Is there one more exploration before the Q&A?
Sure.
Well, no, I'm not sure. Okay, I'll give you a choice. I love to go into the prayer because just the way you reframe the Puer and the Father was
Oh.
incredible. Or I was also really fascinated by your approach to the range of the anima and animus, which I've also always felt that we have both aspects within our psyche, right? So
Mhm.
either or, we can go.
Well, let me answer a little bit on both,
Okay,
okay?
right,
Okay,
okay.
so the anima and animus, Jungian terms, classical Jungian terms, currently are quite debated by a lot of analysts, Jungian analysts. And the reason is that uh, we all contain this range. This is what I feel. We all contain this range of uh, anima and animus. Why should I not have an anima? It doesn't just belong in the unconscious of the man. And we all want to access the extent to which we've got these different qualities. And hopefully they shift through life. They shift. So, I mean, yeah. So I view it as, yeah, sometimes you're using masculine, feminine, whatever. And I appreciate, as an analyst, I very much appreciate the what would be classically the feminine side of a man. An expression, let me not even say that, an expression of his being. And there's where I think we have a responsibility to
Mm.
mirror the expression of one's being. So rather than put them in narrow categories, To me, they go together. Equally, there's an analyst, James Hillman, who wrote on senex and puer. And he wrote senex meaning the old, puer meaning the young. And he wrote this again. We carry the spectrum from young to old. So when we are old, whatever that is, we also want to be young. And when we are young, we want to honor our wisdom and have it honored by fathers. So again, both anima animus and puer and senex are a spectrum. The puer is oftentimes, to me, not honored as much as it really could be, because creative, energetic, lively, out of the box, edgy.
Mm.
Senex is very limiting, classically, limiting, disciplined, linear, rational. So we need both. We need the rational, we need what's logical, but we also need the creative, unusual, unknown, sometimes threatening, lively energy, which doesn't just repeat what has gone before. So I answer a little of both questions.
Yes. There was a quote that I'm going to share. I'm going to share briefly because this was so powerful. Where you shared that prairie are comfortable in the virtual world of the internet, pornography, and video games. They can take on an avatar, be wonderful without much effort, and wear the facade of confidence. So now in contemporary culture, do you feel then that the virtual nature of our world, virtual world provide a temporary refuge for the prayer and even maybe inflate the archetype and maybe become a substitute for its psychological development?
Yes, it can. However, so we can say that we need to be using our computers and our world of computers in a wise and conscientious way. The ones who are not honest on social media would be the ones who are making a facade. They have their avatars and they're not real. And that's the downside, is it's easy to not be real. But it's easy to not be real anyhow.
It's true.
A lot of people are just not real. They feel too vulnerable. They feel too scared. They don't have the confidence. So what they will do is consult with AI and concoct something, which is not really them. Or they'll put something online, which has nothing to do with who they are, but it's a pretend story, and then they have lots of hits. So they feel good. But again, the soul is not addressed. I think the challenge of our time is how we are going to conscientiously use the computer. Partly, look at what we are doing. We are in many different places and we can communicate. The issue is, are we going to communicate honestly or are we going to hide? It's our responsibility to not hide and to be able to put ourselves forward in a very real way. And I think that is the essence of what people learn in analysis and therapy. It's how to be accepted and be real, not perfect, not photoshopped, but real. It's not so easy. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Mm.
So one final question for you, Dr. Schwartz. As many, at least my generation, recent generations have been ascribed the task of stopping the transgenerational wound of fathers, of the masculine. What would be something for fathers to be mindful of in order to limit the transmission of further trauma around father-son dynamics? for fathers to be just mindful enough of that delicate and sacred work, right? So that their son do not inherit the same century-long trauma against vulnerability and what was transmitted to them.
Well, it's many things, but one is also the ability to be open about love.
Mm.
So I think that if the fathers can be able to, it's not just saying I love you. It's really being real with the sons.
Mm.
I made a mistake. I did not treat you well.
Mm.
I want to talk with you about what happened. I mean, how else do things get repaired unless it comes out into the open? And 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 for the father to say, and this is what I learned, and
Mm.
this is why I did not do a good job with you. And how can we repair it now? What can we do? What do you need from me? And for the son to be able to be very upfront, straightforward. I was mad. I was angry. I didn't like it. I ran into drugs because of you. It's not really, but yes, you didn't guide, and on and on. To be able to not just shoot at the father, but to be able to lay out the issues that went unnoticed. Yes, it's up to every generation to fill in the spaces
Mm.
and develop. And I believe also that leads to creativity.
Mm.
It leads to something new. And that's wonderful because we don't want to just be repeating the past. The past already happened. But let's take from the past, be in the present, which is one thing that absent fathers don't teach how to be in the
Mm.
present, and be able to develop something worthwhile and exciting in the future.
Mm. Wow. Thank you very much for all of your wisdom that you generously share with us today. And now for our listeners and those who will be watching, where can one find your book?
Oh, they're online anywhere
Okay.
anywhere in the world. Also from the publisher Routledge.
Okay.
And okay, and again, the discount is 26 AEV1.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and so you can find that. So they're on, any book sites and also on my website, susanschwartzphd.com. There are sample articles and pages from the
Okay.
books as well.
Yeah, you have wonderful resources on your website. So I invite everyone to go and take a look. All right, so we'll stop the recording and then we'll do a Q&A for maybe 10 minutes. That's okay.
Perfect.
Right, so
Yes. Thank you.
stop
Thank
the
you.
recording. Okay.